Well, welcome to another episode of Compliance in Motion. If you're listening and driving along or watching from your desk, we really hope you enjoyed today's episode. I'm Tony DeAscentis, your host of Compliance in Motion. And whether you're on the floor, in the field, or leading from the front office, our aim with this podcast is to bring you insight you need to turn compliance from a mandate into a mindset across your organization. Now, today I'm super excited to have Gabriel Rodriguez, Corporate Safety Director at Sylvester Cockrum, on the podcast as a guest today. He's got 20 years industry of experience. Gabriel, that's a large reach. Thank you so much for joining us today. Greatly appreciate it.
No, I really appreciate you having me, Tony. Thank you.
Yeah. So before we dive into this, like a couple of quick snippets I want to share with people. So at the organization that Gabe works at, they've got literally recognition for excellence in mechanical, electrical, plumbing services across multiple states, predominantly in commercial environment. And Gabe leads these safety initiatives for the company across these diverse job sites and obviously diverse teams. Now, one of the things that I thought was super interesting about Gabriel here is his credentials. You've got the experience and you've got the credential. OSHA outreach instructor, certified manager of environmental health, safety and health, certified corporate health manager, and environmental health and safety specialist. Let's jump right into this, Gabriel. So first off the bat, many safety leaders arrive throughout their craft operations side, bringing on practical, lens to risk because they've had the job and now they're in the safety side and they're working with others. What really led you in your journey and, kind of through the world of safety and ultimately to your role as a corporate safety director at Sylvester Cockrum?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I really can't, I can't take the credit as if I put myself on the path. I'm going to be completely honest. I'm the son of a master plumber, the son
Okay.
of a serviceman. My father is a command sergeant major, recently retired with the United States Military Army, Special Forces. He's also 82nd Airborne. And growing up, it was kind of embedded in me that working in the trades was something to look into, that it was a career that was worth diving into, that it was something that was robust, that you can kind of be able to move around into different areas. I was kind of I don't want to call myself a lost kid, but going through high school and college, didn't really have much direction on what I wanted to do. I knew I needed to do something and I knew I needed to get out there and work and I wanted to make a good salary to be able to support, the family that I now have, but I just didn't know what direction to take. And luckily I had great parents, both involved in my life. My father was, I mean, I can't stress enough, he was instrumental in putting me on the path. I used to spend summers with him actually working in the field on construction sites. I
Cool.
started out as a helper, right? I didn't know much about construction, probably knew even less about turning wrenches and tools. I wasn't mechanically inclined as a kid, but I just liked working with my dad. I really liked working with my hands. And what really caught my attention to safety in that transition as I was going through it was how much of a people person you had to be in order to foster that type of environment, right?
I'll tell you what, I interview people coast to coast, cross industry all the time. And literally the common denominator across all of the interviews is all the safety managers that I've talked to are people. They're in the job first and foremost to help others stay safe on the job. And then the rest of it is the dot the I's, cross the T's, train the people, do all the right stuff. But the motivation is exactly what you just said. And you've had a really great scenario. And I often think that, listeners out there, please, if you have a young adult in your life that is looking for a path in the trades and or a path outside of going to university, because I think that you actually went to college for a little while and then at some point said, that's not for me, I'm going back to the trade route. A lot of times guests like Gabe tell their story and how they ended up as a safety leadership position in their company. and some of the younger people out there that you might know, listeners, could really benefit from understanding the journey, right?
Absolutely.
Uh,
And I mean,
yeah.
it's totally okay if you don't know, right? So when I left high school, I immediately jumped into college. I actually wanted to join the military, coming up under a serviceman. And at that time that I was graduating, it was when we were getting into the Iraq War. And it was really my dad's dream that both of his sons, I have a younger brother, but it was really his dream that we both did it different and we went to university. He really stressed education with both of us growing up. My mom has a master's in accounting. My father has a master's from Penn State. He's also a master plumber, again with the military service. So education was always something that was imparted, but unfortunately, I just had no idea where I wanted to take that. So
And
go
I
ahead.
and I think it's really important to point out is because people often attach the educational path to a university or a college, like that's the direction that you're gonna go. But we're lucky to have so many different organizations in the States that are excellent trade schools or community manufacturing coalition communities and it's serious education because what you guys do, for example, in HVAC and electrical requires all kinds of certifications. And so you're just on a different path to get your education. So let's talk a little bit about the safety culture there at your organization.
Sure.
And as you have a responsibility to work across multiple trades, multiple regions, and often balancing single standards for your entire company to the local realities of that organization. How would you describe those challenges of keeping it all straight, and keeping the culture, alive across all those different dynamics?
Oh man, Tony, it's all about culture building and it's all about buy-in. And that starts with your leadership, right? Oftentimes, and I've worked for many different companies in my career. I've worked for some companies that the leadership is really behind the program. They want to foster that great culture. They want to make sure that all their guys understand the tenets, if you will, of working safe out there and what it means, how it affects the company's interest, right? I've worked for some companies that didn't create that
Mm,
culture, that they weren't behind it, and you can immediately tell when you're dealing with those kind of leaders. um, but I'm lucky enough to work for a company that have two leaders that really foster that buy-in. When I came to Sylvester, I actually was exiting the healthcare industry. I was a compliance officer and regulatory safety officer at a hospital, a local hospital system in Charlotte, North Carolina. And that's really where I got exposed to culture building, creating those important relationships, because in those environments, you can't get anything done without somebody else helping you. So I really tried to bring that into my now job as a director with this company and creating that culture. And it's not been easy. I got to tell you, I
yeah.
mean, you get into it and, folks kind of see you as a little bit of a cop at first.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
it, you really got to kind of dispel that. You got to put that to the side. There's going to be a time and a place for the auditing and the corrective actions and the
Yeah.
risk assessments. That comes with the job. But if you don't lead with kindness and with empathy and trying to help with growing that knowledge, you're going to lose your guys. They're not going to pay attention to anything you have to say.
Yeah.
And to me, that's really been the deciding factor in moving our program forward.
Absolutely. If you're not engaging with the folks out there with the mud on their boots and the PPE on their hand and climbing ladders, getting on roofs in a way
That's
that
it,
they're
man.
absorbing the information you share with them, then there's a big challenge there. And I really I want to make sure we really solidify one point you made there again is a lot of people see you coming in as a cop. Here comes the compliance guy. Here comes the safety guy. But listeners, remember the common denominator that I've seen across all of this is people first. Every one of the safety managers that I've talked to has a compassion to keep people safe on the job. So when you know they're leading because they care, and then the rest of the stuff is there you need to do to keep yourself safe on the job. So with so many people and locations and projects, how do you maintain consistency across such a wide geographic footprint? Tell us a little bit about your safety corporate culture. It starts with the leadership, and there's the grassroots, I'm sure. But what is the structure of it? You have team members out in the field that are responsible, and how do you maintain the consistency of message across such a big organization?
Sure. So right now it's me. I'm the one and only. So as you guys can, just hearing that, 3 states, I got a lot of
There's a
them.
lot of people, by the way, there's a lot of people out there that could probably predicted your answer right
Oh
away.
yeah. Anybody
Yeah.
that's a safety manager knows the struggle, right? We're a little bit of
Yeah.
everything, Tony. We're managers, we're superintendents, we're foremans, we're project managing, we're coordinating, we're handling logistics. I mean, it's a lot rolled into one, but that's why I love it because you get introduced to many different facets of the job. The way that I move my program forward is by getting out there with my guys, right? In this new age of artificial intelligence, you got all these new softwares coming out and just different ways to push a button and toss education. And I love that. And I think
Mhm.
it's helpful to the industry. There's a time and a place to use it, but I still keep people first. And what I mean by that is I'm out there. So if I get looped in on the job, it's not just an audit. It's me showing up before everybody else gets there. It's
Yeah.
walking the job. It's looking for those hazards. When the team arrives, it's grouping them up, it's having the conversations, it's getting them in the right mindset, right, for the
Mm.
tasks that they're going to take on. And sometimes if I've got the time to stay out, I'm hanging out there with them, man. I'm carrying materials. I might put my hands on tools and assist in some of the installs that we're doing, right, under some of the guidance of our more experienced installers. But
Mhm.
what that does is that creates buy-in with my team.
Yeah.
Um, and so that gets that cop mentality out of the way. And when we have our meetings, it's nothing for my team to say, hey, Gabe's, he's out there with us when we're
Yeah.
doing crane lifts, when we're moving
Yeah.
massive cooling towers. I'm
Yeah.
right there. I'm front and
I
center helping with direction and everything.
I love that because quite frankly, it helps you to overcome that hurdle of you being seen as the guy to show up, check all the boxes and leave, right? So if you're
Yes,
there and you're sincere about your approach to keep people safe and you have a relationship with the workers and you do all the compliance stuff you need to do, but then you follow up, you don't just disappear.
right.
So it's not like every time they see you, it's like, oh, here we go again. And so really bonding with that team from top to bottom is just a great example that you're setting there. So
You
let's
got it.
talk a little bit about training. So I know that you're a certified OSHA 10, OSHA 30 general industry, I believe,
I've got
in
general and construction.
general and construction, certified trainer. You can write the cards and all that kind of good stuff. So tell us a little bit about your training approach. There's obviously OSHA 10, OSHA 30 that people have to go through. There's periodic training that I'm sure you put them through monthly throughout. Is it online? Is it in person? Is it a mixture? Walk us through it.
It's a little bit of a mixture for me. I find that that's the best way to get it done. What you see in the trades right now in America, we're going through a little bit of a transition period, right? We've got the old guard that's getting ready to retire, the steady eddies, I call them, if you will, the guys that have been out there in the field for 50, 60 years, right? They're on their way out. And what we have now is a new class of guys coming in that have that computer literacy. They've got the hands-on knowledge as well, but they're much more versed in accessing systems and understanding how to perform trainings online. So we're kind of in this weird period where we've got to marry the two, right?
Yeah,
And
right.
as a director, that's what I try to focus on. So I do a little bit of both. I have some focused learning modules that I may write up. We also use systems in our company. We're actually trialing a new software right now. It's called Interplay Learning, really cutting edge tech. It's virtual reality and things of that sort.
Yeah.
Um, but that's something that we're building towards. And while we're building towards that, I'm also out there doing regular instruction, holding classes. I do some site tailgate trainings as well. It's nothing for me to go to a job site. If we need to have a scissor lift training done, I'll do it right there on the job. I come with a
Mhm.
projector, which you see kind of in the back
Oh,
there.
wow. Great. Yeah.
I'll set it right up out the back of my truck. I have a little battery pack that I invested in. I plug it in, and we're doing
Yeah.
it right there. That saves
Yeah.
critical time and minutes if the situation calls for it, right? Sometimes
Yeah.
you got to think
Right.
quick.
It's a great way to approach it too, because you can create that balance of, people have to remain productive. You've
That's
got
right.
deadlines, you've got customer expectations and things like that. So to pull people off the job and bring them into, another location or whatever, you just show up with the truck and set up shop, and you've got the mobile teaching unit, if you will, or training unit right there.
That's
One
it.
of the things that you touched on is this retiring workforce and the workforce that's coming in. Because now it used to be back in the day when you would hire somebody. it was like, 50-50. They were tech savvy or not tech savvy. Now we're hiring people into our companies and into the trades with young adults who literally know no different. They grew up on technology.
Right.
So, the expectation of having them use write it down with a pen and, or do paper-based stuff. People, they're almost starting out annoyed because they'd rather just do it on their phone or at a computer, right?
Right. I mean, again, it's a mixture. I've got the young guys that when I get out there in the field, they tell me, Gabe, can you just send this to me in an email? And then I've got the older guys, the steady eddies, that are like, hey, man, I need a little bit more hands-on. Maybe we do a group session where I'm reading through some of the material. Like I said, a mix of all the old stuff, PowerPoints, videos, real world experiences, right? And of course, you
Always,
always good, but you gotta always tie that back to the regs, right? It's more than
yeah.
just getting out there and spouting off stuff. It's gotta be grounded in regulation. It's gotta be grounded in what the federal and state laws are. But then you've also got to make it palatable for these guys, right? Nobody out there
Mhm,
is a legal person. So you got to kind of connect it. And I try to do that using real world experience. I draw from that field experience that I grew up using, right, with my dad. And that's really what gives me the buy-in. So it's a different path for me. I know I have other mentors that have done it a different way. But for me, growing up under the wing of somebody that did this, getting out there in the dirt with the guys, being able to speak to the regs, that's how I drive the points home. I mean, and
mhm.
it's served me very well in my 20-year career.
Now, how do you encourage when you're talking to a group of people? How do you transfer the ownership, right? So it's one thing for us to stand up and be experts in what we're trained in as a safety professional or whatever the skill is that a person's demonstrating. But
Right.
especially in compliance and safety, we really have to feel like we're transferring ownership. How do you encourage them to take ownership of their own safety? In a compliance driven environment, right?
Yeah, yeah. So this one I actually learned a lot in my healthcare experience. They used to preach to us personal accountability. I
Mhm.
can't forget that term. It was like a drum beat when I came in working in healthcare regulatory. So I go out there and I present them with real world examples, right? I don't like too much to depend on pre-written presentations. They're great as reference points, but making it more of a discussion amongst the team. You may have a guy out there that was working with a partner and maybe had an adverse experience with regard to not being safe. Maybe he witnessed somebody not wearing PPE and something bad happened as a result.
Yeah.
Calling on that person and getting them to share that, right? Sharing that story, drawing on their own personal experience. That kind of takes the onus off of me as the instructor and puts it back on the guys, and then they're able to relate to their peers and say, oh man, I didn't even think about that, or that story that somebody told me, it resonated with me. Because oftentimes as instructors, and I found this when I was in my scholastic career, you kind of get tired of hearing the teacher talk, right?
Yeah.
They use different language. It's
Right.
they've got their degrees and their credentials. I mean, the people you're talking to don't have that experience, so you have
There's
to
a
hone in
gap.
on there's a gap, right?
There is a gap, and you kind of pointed it out a little bit ago in the conversation here, is that so many of these regs, they read like legal documents. And so you have to, in your position, be able to translate into a day-to-day, hour-to-hour, minute-to-minute task that people need to be able to comprehend and deploy into their task. And
Exactly.
if we just do that once and done, it's not going to happen. So this is why it's so important for the teams, the employees to feel like they own it, so that if they see one of their coworkers missing a key component of compliance or safety, they can point it out and work together and own it even when you're not there, when the training is over, right?
Right, right. And the way that you do that is by cultivating those relationships. So by all means, I'm not suggesting, get out there and have a beer with the guys that work for you, but it's okay to take them to lunch every now and then. I feel like, speak to them about some of the things that they're experiencing. I mean, I've got guys that get personal with me, things that they're experiencing at home. I want to know that. I want to know what's going
Yeah.
on with you when you're away from work, because if you're experiencing a hardship, you're going to bring that to the job. and then you're
Yeah.
not focused on your task, and there we go. That's a prime environment for something bad to take place. So
Yeah, I'm not really sure these days were ever there. I think it was just a lack of understanding where the culture of so many companies used to be leave your personal stuff at home. When
yeah,
you walk on the job site, you're on the job site, you're on my dime.
yeah,
Now that we're more aware of mental health and there's significant data around construction and the trades and HVAC, commercial electrical,
right,
specifically about the mental health of the worker. And it's important to know what's going on to the extent that somebody wants to share it with you and how that's going to affect them in their day. Because not only are we seeing suicide rates and mental health issues so high in construction in some areas of the trade, it's because of the pressure. There's
sure,
the job has got a lot of pressure, and some people come to the job with a home life that is causing, it's not all the time, maybe it's cycles, right, things.
right.
But I'm glad you pointed that out, that you have people that are comfortable, and then you can point them in the right direction if they need that help.
Exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
that's part of the job, man. I mean, you're
Yeah.
the you're the everything guy for these guys.
Yeah.
If you're the
Yeah.
My guys are they only see me. We have all our corporate people in an office somewhere across these
Yeah.
3 states, but I'm the
Yeah.
one moving around on all the jobs. So
Yeah.
I'm the sounding board, if you will,
Yeah.
for
Right.
everybody's issues and problems. So you got to know how to
Yeah.
troubleshoot through that and help.
You gotta know how to troubleshoot and see the signs and things like that. Do you have any particular, tips for anybody in this area? Because it is a little bit touchy, approaching an employee about, they're doing a great job, but you can kinda see something else must be going on there. Do you have any experiences to share where a tip on, like, how to gently approach the situation?
I can give you one that I just had a morning meeting about it right before I jumped on with you, and without I don't want to get too political on the pod here, but we're living in some pretty interesting times in this nation. I had one of my team members that was recently picked up by immigration over the weekend.
Oh, man.
He's an American citizen, was born in this country, but because he's of Hispanic descent, he was identified, he was picked up, he was taken to a holding facility where he spent the weekend.
Phew.
And when I learned
Yeah.
about this yesterday over lunch with him, I could see in his face that it was traumatic for him. And
Of
so
course, yeah. Yeah.
crazy stuff, right? So once we were able to talk about it, I just reinforced that, the company and myself, I'm Hispanic as well. So, I feel that I understand what's going on right now across the country. And what I did was I just, let him vent it. We talked about it. And then I asked his permission if it was okay to bring that to human resources, just to let him know that there are resources within the company that can extend a helping hand to him and maybe troubleshoot through some things that he's struggling with. And he welcomed that. He welcomed that
Mhm.
conversation. And we actually we discussed it on our morning mechanical meeting this morning, our coordination call. And all of my project managers, stood up in support and just reinforced what I had said, that we're here for you, and that, we all offered sympathies and apologies, because nobody deserves to be treated in that way.
No. Yeah,
But that's
absolutely not.
that's a visceral thing that we're dealing with right now. So I would say, Tony, really working with you really should get close to when we're talking about these kind of services. I work so closely with my human resources team. We have great people, that are focused on that, and safety and human resources really they work in tandem regardless
Yeah.
anyway. When we talk about calculating your DART rates and your TRIRs and EMRs, all that information is gathered through my human resources department because they're the ones
Mhm.
that manage how many employees we have. So I've got to go to them to get data anyway, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
again, marrying those two departments, making sure that there's a defined line, but also knowing where we can work together to accomplish, those kind of
Right.
tasks is
Yeah.
critical.
I wanna move on to data in a second here, but before we close out on that piece there, I think one of the things that listeners, just key in on, and I had a podcast guest the other day that was, like, basically kind of saying the same thing as this, is that, before you approach somebody on a situation like this, pause for a second, think about it, and think about if that was you. How would you like somebody to approach you?
That's
With
it.
compassion, understanding, and with questions, not scrutiny and not prescribing, "Hey, you should do this," seek understanding,
Right.
But make sure you center yourself and think about, if that was me, how would I like to be approached? So thank you for bringing that up. It
Definitely.
is certainly very topical, and I'm sure we could have an entire podcast discussion about it, and what's going on there.
Definitely.
But let's go ahead and switch back over to the digital or the data driven side. And you talked about data from HR and things like that. Are you the kind of organization, obviously you're collecting all the right information for near miss reporting and injury rates and trends and stuff like that. How do you use your data?
So
What do you look for in the data?
So again, pulling back to my healthcare side, this is something that I picked up huge there because they don't do anything without data. Okay, and
Right.
in the healthcare industry, if the data's not there, they don't support it. So I pulled from that experience, and something that I constantly tell myself and my leadership team is, when we're having these meetings, guys, data is critical. Data drives conversation. Conversation drives change, right? That's something that I
Mhm.
was taught by my mentor. So I really try to live that. I really try to embody it. And what I'm looking for are, right, what are those key indicators? What are those underlying trends, whether negative or positive? Because oftentimes we tend to focus on the negative stuff first. I also want the positive trend. So, doing things like mid-year safety surveys, right? I develop surveys with about 10 to 20 questions. We've got 9 different departments across 3 states. I fan out, I let the guys take a survey. And what I tell them is, guys, don't give me all of your irritations about the company. And if you feel like you need a raise and all that, we understand that. I just want to know how I'm doing and how this program is working for you. And that's the
Yeah.
opportunity right there to get that buy in again from your
Yeah.
teams, making them feel like they're
Yeah.
a part of the process. And then when we get that data, making sure that you review it in committee. So we have a corporate safety committee that's comprised of obviously myself as the chair, but also our owners, our leadership team, human
Mhm.
resources, employees sit on that committee as well. So it's a well versed environment. We meet
Mhm.
monthly. We look at any
Wow, great.
incidents that took place. We review all accidents. We look for best practices, right? Management attends. If they have a good call out for one of their teams or on a job that they did, I want to highlight that because what we want to do is try to duplicate that success, right?
Yeah, so some takeaways for me there was structure. Consistency of time, frequency, consistency. So you do this monthly, but then you have structure with your committees, your teams, your surveys. And we all know that crews are most engaged on an ongoing basis when they see their input making changes to process, or their input actually is getting heard. You can't do a survey and then tuck it away.
That's right.
You've got to come full back to the people that shared information with you and build confidence with them that you're actually doing something. And you've got this cadence of meetings and committees and people, starting with your surveys and really contributing to that. So you're really, like, hitting a grand slam on keeping those folks engaged with input.
You got to be out there, man. You got to constantly. They got to see you constantly. You got to get that feedback. When they tell you there's a problem, you can't just shove it under the desk. You got to take hold of that problem, and maybe you can't solve it. Maybe sometimes it's just pointing them in the direction of the person that can. But then coming back and
Mhm.
saying, "Hey, I got the answer you needed. Let's move to this,
Yeah,
and we'll move your issue up further." That makes all
yeah,
the difference. That's all people want. They just want to know that they're important to the company,
yeah.
and I try to do that.
And and a component of making them feel like they're important is listening and then doing something with that action. Earlier, we talked about how I asked you how you get to transfer ownership
Right.
to the teams, and we talked a little bit about that. This is obviously a big component of people feeling like they own the process versus you, Gabe, just showing up and telling them what the process is, right?
That's right, and part of that is getting their buy-in. Not all processes are good processes. Sometimes we do too many processes, right? And so when we introduce a new software or a new system or a new SOP, educating to that SOP is great, but then getting that feedback from the people that you're educating is probably the most critical because ultimately they have to be the ones to put it into practice. I'm just writing it and I'm just educating on it,
Mhm.
but
Yeah,
they're the ones that
yeah.
have to put it in the field and use it. And if you're not listening to that feedback, if they're telling you that, hey, this is, too long of a process. Maybe the form is not working right, or can you make this fillable so that we can do it on our iPad or whatever the case is. That's critical information, and you want to absorb that. You want to bring that back to your internal team and then try
Yeah.
to work on those solutions, because ultimately, if you don't have that buy-in, you're not going to get the
Yeah.
job done.
It's gonna be a piece of paper in a binder somewhere, and
Exactly.
it's not gonna get absorbed. Now, one of the things about your particular industry, you have a lot of high-risk situations going on, from mechanical, stuff that you work with, electrical, plumbing work, energized systems, confined space, hot work, fleet exposure, elevation risk, all of these kinds of things really create a work environment that is high risk, right?
Yeah.
And so you're just touched on developing SOPs and standard operating procedures for those listeners out there. So talk to us a little bit about, in your line of work, the highest risk tasks or environments your ta teams face, and how do you is it experienced individuals, and they're following the SOPs, and they're helping you to refine those over time? How do you make sure you stay ahead of those super high risk situations?
Oh man, I mean, I think it's a marriage of everything, right? So I can give you a couple of quick ones, right? Just this week
Please. Yeah.
alone, I went from moving a 10-ton cooling tower to instructing for a confined space scope of work that we had in a dog food processing plant, where we had to physically put men down in the mixing container and do some welds to get that piece of equipment back online. I mean, every day is it presents a different challenge, right? This morning I woke up, one of my drivers was involved in an auto accident where somebody kind of bumped into him as he was making his way home. So I've got to
Mhm.
investigate that. I'll be doing that after this call, making the phone calls, doing the after action reviews, all that fun stuff. But it's a marriage of everything. And what I try to do is I try to keep myself open to different ways of attacking problems. And what I mean by that is constantly staying engaged with my peers. Safety is evolving, it's changing every day. Doing things like just signing up for regular webinars, right? I get all these flyers in my inbox about, hey, take this course, or sign up for this quick little 30-minute blast on confined space. It's
Mhm.
very easy to forget, some of the information
Yeah.
that you learn. And so what I
Yeah.
try to do is just keep myself constantly learning, right? I I,
Yeah.
I like to interact with mentors. I seek mentorship. That's probably if nothing else breaks through today, mentorship for me has been critical.
Yeah.
Knowing people to put you on the path and help you. I've got a host of great mentors. One of my strongest mentors used to work for DH Griffin, AIG, a whole host of others. He's getting ready to retire. We had lunch yesterday, and he said, "Hey, man, come by my house. I've got boxes of stuff from the 70s and the 80s, just old regulatory stuff." And I said, "I'll take it all." So I
Yeah.
went, picked up boxes of stuff, and I can't wait to dive into it and read it. Sometimes you got to go back in the past and look at
Yeah,
what
you
went
do.
well there
Yeah.
and bring it back
Yeah.
into the future. So, like I said, it's just marrying all the different aspects of safety, getting out there, keeping yourself engaged and knowledgeable, and then, taking that knowledge on the road with you and imparting it on others. That's been critical for me.
Yeah. So when you think about knowledge and refining knowledge of lessons learned and things like that, as you go forward, and think about it in the context of incident response, or incident learning, if you will. When an organization reports a near miss, and especially if it's a near miss versus an injury, near miss gives us this opportunity now to cause pause and process what went on, like kind of look at it and say, how can we improve it so that it doesn't ultimately end up in an injury? What How do you take that knowledge from that incident report or from that near miss report and move it into a lesson learned and perhaps changing a process?
Yeah, yeah, totally. So for me, I treat near misses as free lessons, right? It's like that could have been bad, right? But it can't
Yeah.
stop there. Okay. We have
Yeah.
to dig into it. I set up what's called a root cause analysis. I'm sure everybody on the podcast is familiar with that. So I jump in and I start looking at ways to document what took place. I'm really huge on documentation. I've had some experience managing as a risk manager in my in former places of employment. So I like to bring in my insurance company, my risk management firm as well. They come in and I have them auditing job sites where I can't get to. I have them helping me with SOPs because I'm not the expert on everything, right? I always say I know enough to be dangerous, but somebody out there knows more than me. So again,
Mm,
that mentorship, that getting out there and meeting people in the industry, drawing from their experience. And if you're lucky enough, if your company is lucky enough to have those types of services with insurance firms and risk management agencies, use them. You can bring those guys in. They can help you with creating corrective actions, sharing what takes place, and then marrying that into the committee, right? Because it's one thing to get that information, but then how do we spread it across our wide enterprise? So I get it in committee, and then as I travel around to each office, because I do this every month, every week, I'm in a different place. I
hmm.
bring whatever the scenario is. Maybe we had an issue in South Carolina, and I'm meeting with my Tennessee team, this week. I'm going to tell them, hey guys, here's a roundup of what took place across the company. I also do newsletters. I do safety flashes are huge for me. I like to put in, different information. Our managers oftentimes are overloaded. They've got a lot to
Yeah.
manage. So I try to take some of that safety management off of them, get that information out there through any avenue that I can, whether it be through an email blast, our social media page. We're very active on LinkedIn. We've just relaunched our new website that we're
Oh, great.
working on.
Yeah.
So my goal is it's not information overload, right? It's making sure that it's palatable, digestible, but also
Yep.
making sure that it's front and center because nothing moves without safety being at the forefront. If you're not practicing safety in your company, you're going to pay for it at some point in time. So you've got to have that as your chief principal mandate and then build out everything your hierarchy of controls, if you will, right? You build
Yeah.
out everything from there, and then luckily, hopefully you'll see some good results from that model.
Well, this has just been a fantastic conversation with you, Gabe, today. I have a feeling that if you and I didn't have to wind it down at some point, we'd probably just end up talking and doing a deep dive in a handful of different subjects. But your depth, breadth of education mixed with experience and certifications has just been of awesome foundation for you to breathe some life into and have a discussion with me today. So thank you so much. And I truly appreciate you carving out some time. So, as we wrap up here today, I have three quick rapid fire questions for you. Top of mind answers. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. What's your go to phrase for reminding people about safety?
Oh man, I really hate the old adage, but it's I want you to go home safe. I can't get it out of my head. It's an old one, but it's a good one.
It's a good one. Yeah. I want you to go home safe and injury free,
That's
right?
it. That's it.
You got to, whatever your thing is at home waiting for you, kids, wife, friends, by yourself going hiking, we want to make sure you get to keep doing that. So,
That's
right,
it.
go home safe and injury free. Here's the second one. Biggest myth. What is the biggest safety myth you wish people would stop believing?
Oh, that we're just big compliance nerds.
Yeah.
That's not true. We that is a
Yeah.
part of it. But like we started out with on the show today, being a people person, having that wanting to help, right? I just always want to help somebody. I want to, if I can end my day by helping another person, and I don't know if that's due to my faith, religion, upbringing, whatever, then I feel like that day's been a success. So that I would
Yep.
I would say, being helpful and really keeping that in the front.
And then the last one is what's the one tip you would give somebody considering a career as a safety professional?
I hit on it multiple times. Mentorship, mentorship, mentorship. Get out there,
Yeah.
meet people in the industry, learn about what it is that they do because it's very vast. Absorb it, get out there and meet as many people as you can and have a good time at it.
There you go. And that's it for today, folks. We want to give a big thanks to Gabe for participating in Compliance in Motion today. I hope you all enjoyed it. If you did, please like, subscribe, and share. We've got some excellent content out there for folks out there that feel like they're alone or they don't have a strong community of safety professionals to tap into. Grab a cup of coffee, launch the Compliance in Motion podcast, and hang out with folks like Gabe and get some valuable insights. Till next time, I'm Tony DeAscentis, your host of Compliance in Motion, and our guest today, Gabe Rodriguez. Thank you very much, Gabe.
Thank you, Tony. Really appreciate it.